Welcome back to another episode of the Life in the Right Layne Podcast. Victoria and Nicholas here, and we hope that you guys had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend celebrating and being outside.
Right. For any international listeners who are not in the United States, Memorial Day is just a day we have that honors our fallen, and it's really turned into a great time to go to the lake or the beach or grill outside. So we spent our Memorial Day at the pool, and my shins got burnt, so that wasn't fun. But other than that, I think we were good.
I told them to put sunscreen on.
I wouldn't think my shins would be fried.
I know, I wouldn't think that either. But
I thought they had some immunity.
But yeah, so we took the week off last week to celebrate with friends and family. So now we're back. Mm-hmm. And this week, we are talking about red flags when it comes to dating and relationships. And I think this is really important because when you're in a relationship, things are very emotional, and you're going off of your feelings in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And it can be hard to, let me rephrase that. It can be easy to justify things when you're in the relationship. So it's important to kind of identify some things before you get into it, I think, because maybe that'll help you remember these things when you see them in that person or just in your relationship in general. Mm-hmm. And you can start to pinpoint, okay, this is not good. This is a non-negotiable, and you can talk about it or reevaluate. And if things don't change, then you know that that's probably not the relationship for you.
Right.
And just because mainly when the person comes along that the Lord has for you and that is a suitable partner for you and is equally yoked in every sense of the word, you'll know, and it'll just kind of fall into place. It won't be super hard. And I feel like in past relationships for both of us that we've talked about, it was almost like trying to fit a square inside a circle. It just wasn't working, and we were trying to make it work when the Lord was saying, no, clearly this is not the relationship for you. So we just kind of wanted to break down a few points that we've thought about just based on our past relationships, and hopefully it helps you. These are obviously not absolutely, these are red flags that you should look for. It kind of depends on who you are in the relationship, and these are just some things that we thought of that kind of would be a blanket for everybody.
Right. And they reflect pieces of our own dating history. Mm-hmm. This is a good conversation to revisit if you are in the middle of a relationship and maybe you're a little bit blind to some of the things that are happening or defending some of the things that are happening. The other point I think we want to make with this is that these are conversations that you need to be having with your significant other if you are down this path. It doesn't mean as soon as you see one of these, you run away. I think for all 5 of these that we're about to share, for the most part, there are things you do not want for a long term or even very much longer than a very short term. Mm-hmm. But if you see them, have the conversation with your partner and then reevaluate after a while. And if those continue, at that point, you need to say, I've seen the flags. I had the conversation. Nothing changed. So either this person isn't ready at this point to date, or it's just not the right person and I need to go looking elsewhere. You should never be afraid to leave a relationship if it is not healthy and is not glorifying God. Yeah. You're your own person. The Lord has his own relationship with you, and you need to approach every relationship thinking, I trust God with my life, and I'm going to be okay no matter what. Mm-hmm. Whether I have a partner or I'm by myself, I'm chasing after the Lord. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. It's not that I have to have someone with me. You have to be okay with, can I still pursue the Lord by myself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And also a good point that these red flags are not like, oh, I think I see that in my relationship, or I see that in him or her, break up with them. Like, we're not saying that. I think you made a good point. Like, they're red flags for a reason. It's like to get you to stop and reevaluate, like, okay, and if this doesn't get better, then you revisit or consider getting out of the relationship. So it's not like if they have this, then you immediately break up with them. It's just to get you thinking. And a lot of times red flags lead to like a toxic relationship. So these can kind of like tip you off, like, okay, maybe this isn't very healthy actually. So anyways, I think they're there for a reason, and they're good boundaries to have and good things to think about. And they of course can be different for you, but these are just a few that really stood out to us when we were thinking about our former relationships. So the first one that I have is always doing the same thing when you spend time together. So you're not like advancing your relationship at all. You're not intentionally growing together and getting to know each other. And I think that's important, because it's not to say that you can't watch a movie or you can't go out with some friends and have dinner or do something fun like that. But it's like when you're always doing the same thing and not intentionally getting to know each other during that time, then that could probably be like, okay. So for example, one relationship I was in, he never wanted to like go out and do anything. It was always like sit around whoever's house. This was in college, and kind of like lay around and watch movies and not really like move or do anything healthy with our bodies or like have good conversations. It was always just like turn on the TV, you know? And then in another relationship, it was always like party and fun times and going out with friends. And that's, you know, can be good too, but all the time. And it was taking away from him really getting to know me, and it was taking away opportunities for me to really ask him good, deep questions so that I can decipher whether or not he would be good for me. So that's where I'm like, it has to be this balance, because you can't always do the same thing every time you hang out and expect to grow that relationship.
Yeah, you're not taking advantage of the dating season. And as a reminder, dating is for evaluation. So our job while we're dating someone is to try and evaluate them to see, is this someone that has a strong character and is pursuing the Lord? And is this someone that I get along very well with and we have good chemistry and I can see myself having a great relationship with for a long, long time? When you are just dating to be in the stage of dating, you missed the entire idea of dating.
Right.
So many people get to that point because they see their friends with their boyfriend or girlfriend and they think, I need someone. I need someone to do things with. And I think that's innocent enough. But what it becomes is this relationship that has its own responsibilities and privileges, and a relationship that you just kind of sit in. And that's why I think see so many people just saying, I don't even need to get married. I'll just live with this person. We're just going to keep dating. It's no different than marriage, right? Which we don't agree with for many reasons. And I think we'll definitely address it on another podcast because it is a long conversation. But essentially it boils down to you are using the dating stage to act like you're married, but you haven't properly progressed. So the dating stage has to be advancing your relationship. Yeah, it's totally fine to watch movies, to go out with friends. But when you find someone that's doing it all the time, what that shows me is that they just want to sit in the stage that you're in. They don't want to progress. They don't want to get to know you better. They don't want to further understand how you guys will work well together in the future. They just want to sit where they are, even if it's going out. You know, they just want to stay in this stage, and it might indicate that they are hesitant about what that looks like to progress. And it also might indicate they're being lazy with your relationship. So if you see this, this is a great conversation to have, because I think it is very easy to happen, especially if you are, like you said, dating in college. Most people aren't just going to get married in the middle of college. So if you start dating someone your freshman year, you have, 3 more years after that where you're probably going to still be dating.
Right.
That's a long time. So I understand the people that say, well, like, what are we supposed to do? We can't get married yet. But there are things you can do to continue to get to know each other.
Absolutely.
That is not just, we always just watch Netflix at his apartment every night, and that's basically it. Mm-hmm. So I understand that. But this needs to be a conversation when you start to notice it, and you can say to your significant other, what are some other things that we can start doing? You don't need to call them out and say, oh, you always make us do the same thing. Don't make it an argument, but seriously suggest suggest some activities, and then ask them, what are some things that you would like to do? Mm-hmm. And then over the next couple of weeks, try to do those things. If you encounter a lot of resistance, if that person is still not willing to do things with you or to have intentional conversations, doing something might just be, hey, let's play a board game at your house.
Yeah.
And not just watch TV. Or let's go on a walk.
Yeah, because like you're saying, dating is evaluation for marriage. So it's actually to your benefit. The more different types of things that you do with them, the more environments you see them in, you're going to see a different side of their personality playing a board game than you are just sitting on the couch, or than you are going rock climbing, or than you are if you go to dinner with friends. Like, see them in all these different facets so that you can get a better sense of who they are and their personality and what you're getting yourself into if you do decide that they are a suitable life partner for you.
Yeah. So if you don't see any real change after you have that conversation, then you need to consider the fact that this person may not be wanting to progress your relationship, and it may be time to step away for a brief period. Sometimes that wakes that person up, and they realize, I really have been pretty lazy. But have the conversation and see where it goes, and be willing to say, if this person's not going to put in the work, if they're not going to be striving to get to know me better, then what is it going to be like in year 7 of marriage when we already know a lot about each other?
Right.
Because dating, you know the least about that person compared to the entire duration that you would be with him if you got married. You're still in this early stage, and you should have so much to talk about, so much to get to know.
That's really
So what is it going to be like when you're married?
Yeah.
And you know a lot of things. You want them to still be pursuing you then.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, because I think there's like a statistic, like you change, like slightly your personality changes every like 7 years or something. So there's still going to be like new things that I get to explore and get to know about Nicholas as we continue progressing in our marriage, and, adding children into the mix, and like houses and all the things that come with life. I still need to be making an effort to get to know him. And so if you're already lazy and stagnant in pursuit of just your relationship while dating, then yeah, what is it going to be like when you're 50 and your kids are going off to college? And that's where I think a lot of marriages start to like crumble, because it's like, well, I don't really know, like we're kind of just roommates. Like the kids kind of held us together. For the last 20 years of raising children, we weren't pursuing one another. We were putting all of our focus on our kids, which is good to build a good, healthy family home. But you also have to be putting your marriage first. And I know that, we're preaching to the choir, and who are we to say, like, because we haven't gotten that far in our marriage. But I think this is good to remind ourselves too, like to continue getting to know each other, like keep dating. I hear that saying all the time. What is it? Like never stop dating or something like that once you get married. And I think that's so true. And that's really good advice. Like don't stop the thrill of like taking her out on dates or coming up with new ideas of things to do together or questions to ask each other. Sometimes I feel like when we go out to dinner, if we don't really have something like pressing on our minds to talk about, I'll think of a question, and I'm sure you do this too, of something that I don't know about Nicholas. And I'll think about something I don't know and then ask that question. Like last time, I think it was like, what's something that I don't know about your childhood? Like, what's something that happened that I don't know about? And so then he's able to share with me a story and something that happened to him that helped shape him into who he is today and like all these things. So I'm still continuing to get to know him, even though we've already locked in the marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, marriage is not a fix-all. Like once you get married, it's not like you have to stop putting in the work because you've already locked it in and you've got the ring.
Right.
That's, again, why a lot of marriages fall apart and people fall out of love, in air quotes, because, or they don't make you happy anymore, which is not the point of marriage, first of all. But second of all, you have to keep getting to know each other and keep doing fun things together. Keep it alive.
Yeah.
Because that's, I think, a lot of times why dating is so exciting, because you don't know how it's going to turn out or what they're thinking or what, and you're doing fun new things together. And it's like an adventure every day, at least at the beginning. But like, why stop? Like, why let that end when you get married? Why not continue that? Why not make marriage fun too?
Right.
And again, that's going to be work, but putting in the work is worth the reward that comes out of it. Like, we have a really great relationship because we are trying to build this relationship continually and not just coast.
Yeah. Yeah. So pro tip there, try new things together that neither one of you has done. That's an easy way to continue to get to know your spouse. How do they react to that?
We went rock climbing for Memorial Day weekend because we don't have a boat or anything, or we don't even know anybody with a boat. And so we did go to the pool for a little bit. But I had been wanting to go rock climbing, and Nicholas is trying to take me on 35 dates this year.
I don't remember the number.
Oh,
I need to write it down.
That was one.
I've stopped writing them down.
That was one of his New Year's resolutions, to take me on X amount of dates this year, which is so sweet. And so something that I had been wanting to do with him is rock climbing, and that was so fun to get to see each other in a different environment. Like, that's not something that you do every day. And so we had both been rock climbing before, but never together. So that was just really fun to get to do together.
Yeah, it was.
To get to see you scale these big walls.
Yep.
It was fun.
All right. So our second red flag really comes down to the conversations you have. So I think the first one is something that you won't really discover until you've been in the relationship for a little bit. This is one that you can discover almost on the first date. And that is selfish conversation from the other person. So what tends to happen with people who are mostly thinking about themselves is you'll tell them a story, or you'll tell them something that's impactful about you. Even if it's small, you'll tell them something, they'll respond like, wow, or that's really cool. And then immediately launch into something that relates to them. And that, to me, demonstrates that they're not truly interested in getting to know you, understanding you, listening, and then actively responding to that. It's immediately like, well, actually, that made me think of something about myself. And so everything tends to revolve around them. If good. You start to see that repeatedly, bring it up to them and just say, hey, I've noticed that in our conversations that we've had, it tends to be a lot about you. And I just wanted to see if maybe you noticed that, and see if they even know that they're doing it, because they may not. Especially if the person you're dating has been single for a number of years, they just may not be in practice. So just bring it up casually and say, hey, I just noticed this. I just wanted to know if maybe you could just see about focusing on that and maybe try to respond to the things I say.
I think that's a really mature way to handle it. It's important, I think, especially if you're like semi in the early dating stages, to not be so emotional when something like this arises and you notice something like that kind of like hurts you, I think that's a great way to approach it. It's just like a conversation, not like lunging at them and like,
you never listen to me. You always talk about yourself.
Yeah.
If you use the words never and always when you have an argument, you really need to reevaluate how you're approaching the argument, because it never works and it's always a bad idea.
That was funny.
Yeah, thank you.
I noticed that. I picked up on it. I just think that that's a good way to approach it, because if you immediately come at them and start, throwing around accusations, not believing the best of them, because like you said, they may not even notice that they're doing it, then that immediately will make them not feel safe, and they'll kind of like curl up and be on the defense to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's something that is just really good in any conflict situation, like that I'm still learning too, like with us, and approaching it in a very like, you can be passionate, but like try to take the high emotions out of it and just get on a level playing field and just give them the benefit of the doubt of like, I'm just going to address this and bring it up and see what they have to say about it. And we can talk about it and get to a conclusion. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really good.
Yeah, I think so too. Look out for that. Our next one is one of Victoria's that I think
oh yeah, so I guess playing off
very
of
common in toxic relationships.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a good tip off. If you're in a toxic relationship, then this probably happens. I've been there. If they are going off of emotions and high emotions, if they're threatening to break up often, and even if like they influence you to do that, because in my situation, he was saying it so much and throwing it around so emotionally that I started pulling out that card, and that's really not healthy. So we were just in the cycle of like back and forth. If one of us was upset, it was immediately like, well, then we should just break up. And that is not stable. That is not going to withstand the time of marriage. And, that's just a huge red flag. And ultimately, it's showing that they're using emotion to get what they want out of the relationship or what they want in that circumstance. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a huge red flag for not only just in a relationship, but that's a red flag to tip you off that it could be a toxic relationship, because they're kind of like a roller coaster and just all over the place and throwing around emotion to trigger you. And then you're kind of all over the place. And it also, a marriage is supposed to be a safe place. This is supposed to be a representation of Jesus and his church. And there should be safety and security in that. And so if you're constantly up and down in a relationship and all over the place and crying one minute and then laughing the next, like just your emotions are so heightened and then lowered and heightened and lowered, that's not healthy. And that's going to make you feel not safe in that relationship. Like you can't come to them with something that could potentially upset them, because then you're scared, right, well, they're going to leave me if I bring this up. And then you start not sharing things with each other. You start pulling away from one another because you don't want to be vulnerable and show who you really are. And that takes away the intimacy of the relationship, takes away going deeper together and really working on building your relationship and your security in that foundation. So I think that that is a huge red flag that could make everything just kind of like crumble, because it's just all over the place. Like life, I think we've said this before on the podcast, but life is really hard and there will be a lot of ups and downs. So why do you want to be with someone who's already causing a lot of ups and downs? Mm-hmm. That's something that like I always chase after, because it's like a thrill of like, you don't know what you're going to get. I think girls oftentimes do that. Like, and it's silly, because I want someone who's going to be constant, who's going to remain the same and be faithful to me and only me, and come to me when something is wrong, and just having that consistency in the relationship really brings about a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a really good point you made about the intimacy of your relationship deteriorating after that tendency of break up, not break up happens.
Right.
And someone might actually follow through with it. They might break up with you and then come back and say, oh, it was a mistake. Get back together, and then break up and get back together.
Yeah.
What it tends to show is the cycle of ups and downs that reflects the very transitory nature of your relationship. If only the circumstances are perfect, does your relationship hit the high highs, and anything else crashes it down.
That's a good point.
It is so freeing to have a relationship that is solid and steady and always steadily appreciating as we grow older, you know?
You're probably thinking about stocks right now, aren't you?
Well, it's across my mind. No, but it is true. Like personal finance is a good example. If you're always trying to make money in these get rich quick schemes, which we watched a Netflix thing about that the other day.
We did?
Yeah, I think you fell asleep.
What was it called? Fast
Schemes.
Money?
No, it was
Schemes? It was called Schemes?
Well, there's a documentary series on Netflix about money, and one of them was about get rich quick schemes.
So, I must have fallen asleep.
Yeah, she doesn't usually make it very long.
Well, when it's all, fancy financial terms, I just kind of zone out. That's your thing.
It was for Netflix. It was for the common people. Anyway, for the people that are steady with their money and steadily saving and things like that, they end up at the end of time with so much more than someone who is constantly up tons and then down a lot. So with relationships, it is an investment. It will grow over time if you find someone that is steady. As your relationship improves, as you get a stronger connection to your partner, that will continue to really bring you a lot of joy. And that the high highs that you were chasing, what's funny is that if you like drew a line of like, okay, here's where we started and here's where the crazy relationship started. And you start, I guess it'd be more this way. You start going up with the steady one and the high highs are already up here, but then it's high and low and high and low. At some point, the highs that you get from a steady relationship will surpass the highs that you get from a relationship that's always up and down. And I think people get into relationships and they think, this is so boring, especially if you've been in a relationship that has a lot of high highs and low lows, because you expect those euphoric feelings to happen in a relationship. And then you're with someone and you're like, I don't feel that. It just feels like really steady. And we actually had that same experience when we started dating. Both of us felt that. And it was like, it was this steady warmth, I guess you could say, of like starting like the embers of a fire. We weren't having the gasoline flames. It was just like this building of this foundation. And we weren't necessarily feeling all of these amazing emotions all at once. That was something that grew
really
over time.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it was a very steady, constant growth.
You don't want to feel all of this emotion on yourself all the time. You need to find someone that's steady. And so this is an example of something that if you're in a relationship where people are constantly threatening to break up, it's an example of someone who wants the high highs and the low lows, and they want to manipulate you to try to get where they want to go, or they just want to feel the emotion. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that the world kind of like hates on marriage, and that, culture is always saying like boring old married couples and like, things just get boring and lame if you stay with the same person your entire life. And I'm just here to say that it is way more fun when you have that steady, solid companionship. When you're just dating and you don't know what's going to come next and what's around the corner or what they're going to do or what they're going to say, that's not fun. And continuing to date until, like a lot of people think that they're not supposed to be with only one person their entire lives. And I think that's so exhausting. Like there is so much freedom and joy found in building a life with just one person that you're super compatible with, that the Lord blessed you with. That is way more fun, way more exciting, and a huge blessing from God. Like we do not deserve that. But he gives us the option to, if we follow his will and his path for our life, then most of the time it will end up in a fruitful marriage when you keep him at the center. But when we go off and try to do our own thing and, chase these cheap thrills that the world says will make us happy, then we're never going to be fully satisfied in the Lord in our relationship. So
it's well said.
I just think marriage is the greatest thing. I tell everybody.
Yeah, it has been excellent.
Like marriage is just the best.
All right. So another red flag that we thought of is someone who repeatedly puts you down in front of others. This is a common occurrence where one person gets the laughs. And so by putting down their partner, they get laughs from people in public, and it doesn't seem to matter to them how their partner feels. You could also find this in a scenario where someone is talking about their partner behind their backs. You wouldn't necessarily know that, obviously, because it's behind your back. But
you should feel convicted about that.
You should, yeah. So if you were doing that yourself, stop. You do not need to be speaking negatively about your spouse or your partner behind their back to other people. So a very important opportunity that married people have, and even dating and engaged, but it's mostly in marriage, is the opportunity to be that person's cheerleader and encourager. And that person is someone that can spur you on to do so much more because of how they encourage you.
Yeah.
And how much less do you think you could be able to do if that person's constantly putting you down? You are not going to be successful in your marriage if your spouse is putting you down constantly. And in a dating relationship, if that begins to start, if you don't address it, it's going to continue. So that's a conversation that you need to have, and you need just to point to a very specific instance when it happens. Don't generalize. Try to keep it very specific.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And again, stay away from the words always and never. But have the conversation.
Full of like golden nuggets today.
Thank you.
I'm learning so much from you.
Thank you very much. Happy to help.
Was that good encouragement?
That was great encouragement. You're doing a great job. You're doing a fine job.
I'm your cheerleader over here.
So have the conversation and say, hey, this happened. This is what you said. This is how it made me feel. Don't accuse them of having a bad motive. That's a really big one.
Another good nugget.
Yeah. You need to expect that they were doing something not intentionally. You may find out it's intentional, but don't go into it thinking that. Tell them how it made you feel and see what they say. See how they respond. If they respond defensively, there's a good chance they kind of know they did something wrong and they're not willing to admit it. If they respond, fairly and say, okay, yeah, I'm sorry for doing that. But then it continues to happen and you bring up, I'd say probably 3 or 4 more times would be kind of my limit, but that's up to you. That's where it starts to get individualized. How many times are you willing to put up with it? How severe are they? But if you bring it to them multiple times and they're just still not getting it, that's where you need to consider the fact that they may not be willing to change at this point. It doesn't mean they won't change ever, but the whole point again of dating is evaluating someone, and don't give them a free pass on something that is as important as being a good encourager, because that will come back to bite you later, and you don't want to be in a marriage where someone is constantly putting you down. And once you're married, you're married. We do not advocate divorce unless in, as the Bible says, a situation where there's adultery. Or
if it's unsafe.
Yes. Or if, yeah. If your spouse is trying to kill you or something, I think that's appropriate. Or
that
is
so
harming you
morbid.
mentally. Well, I mean, the Bible doesn't say, like, if your spouse repeatedly tries to kill you, it's okay to divorce them.
Well, I just mean, like, if it's an abusive relationship, and that could encompass a few different
I'm just
things.
thinking, the Bible doesn't say that. Interesting.
I know, it doesn't. It doesn't. Well, maybe...
If you were fleeing from your life, or from your spouse, fleeing for your life, then maybe it's okay to divorce them.
We'll just write Paul and tell him to add that in the footnotes.
Add that one as a supplement. Mm-hmm. But we don't advocate divorce. And once you're married, you're married. So choose wisely. That's the point of dating.
Yeah.
People who are in miserable marriages, and I hate to say that, but there are many.
Yeah.
They did not choose wisely. They did not use their time dating to evaluate and notice the red flags and have conversations. And if nothing changed, they didn't take the action to end the relationship, at least for the time being.
Yeah, that's really good. I saw something the other day, someone's caption. She was like announcing, I think she was some type of influencer. We don't follow her, but I came across her page and she was announcing that her and her husband were getting divorced and they didn't make each other happy anymore, which we should do an episode on that because I've got a lot to say about that. But then, where was I going with that? What were you just saying?
Once you're married, you're married. Divorce, reasons for a divorce.
Yeah.
Encouragement. Life in the Right Layne Podcast. Maybe that'll jog your
Nicholas
memory.
Lane.
Yeah. Where are you right now?
Okay. Huh.
Well,
never mind. Okay, forget I just said that. There was a point I was going to make. I wasn't trying to throw her under the bus, but there was a point of something that she said in her caption, but I can't remember what it is. Why don't you start on the next point and I'll think.
Well, our last point to wrap this up, because I'm looking at the time here, it's been longer than, we always go way over what we say. Not that there's a time limit, but
True.
We know that kind of at a certain point, if you're still listening, thank you. Because it's typically people's attention span is low. Oh.
In her caption, I'm so sorry to interrupt. In her caption, she was saying that she can't like sit here and say that there weren't red flags. Like she did ignore red flags when they were dating. And she was kind of saying that's how we got to this point. She threw the we don't make each other happy anymore thing in there. But the main part of it was she knew when they were dating that this was not good. This was not right. It probably wasn't healthy. Maybe it made her compromise on her faith or morals or whatever it was. And when you ignore these red flags, whatever they are for you, whatever you feel convicted on, whatever the Lord is leading you towards or away from, whatever you compromise on these red flags, that ultimately could lead to the situation that she found herself in, where like, no matter how hard I try, I can't make this work because even when we were dating, it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And now you're in marriage, now you're married. And, for a believer, like that's locked in for life. So not to say that things can't change. God restores, he redeems, he can bring people back together. But if it was already someone that you weren't equally yoked with, the Bible is very clear on finding a partner who's equally yoked with you, spiritually speaking mainly. Like you have to be running after Jesus together at the same pace, or it's just not going to work.
Right.
It can't work.
The quick note here to supplement this is do not overanalyze someone to the point that you say any sin that I see is a reason for me not to marry them and get locked up and not go through with a marriage that could be incredible, because we're all sinners, and you have to approach things from that standpoint. You have to first say, I have a log in my eye, and then I need to recognize my own sin. I need to remember that Jesus redeemed me from that, and that he has to redeem my future spouse, because they can't do it for themselves either.
Right.
Where it starts to be a problem is when you say, I notice that this person who should be continually coming back to Christ, and I should see improvement, and I should be able to have a conversation with them that leads to a positive outcome. I see that's not happening. At that point, you have to say that person just may not be ready for marriage when I am, and therefore they just may not be the right person. There are still things that you notice about me that you don't like and that you know need to be straightened out for our marriage, and vice versa. But you do see in me that I am constantly going to Jesus and he is pointing me back in the right direction, and that we're having conversations where I'm getting it. So that's why we're advocating for you to have a conversation about all of these red flags, not to just talk about amongst your friends and then go break up with that person. Have a conversation with them, because in so many cases, we've all done these things.
Yeah. So
don't ever approach this from a holier than thou standpoint that says, I am perfect and you must meet these requirements in order for me to deem you worthy of marriage. We're all sinners. But there are certain things that if someone's just not getting, you're noticing that these things are potentially very dangerous for a relationship. You do have the ability in dating to point them out, and then if they don't change, leave the relationship. And you can do it gracefully, and we will do an episode on breaking up gracefully. I actually think we did.
We did. We could do it again.
We could refresh that. So our last point here is, if your partner is not pushing you closer to Jesus and they are actively pulling you away from the things that he has for you, they're pulling you away from things that look like running after him, you're being pushed in a completely different direction. That is the biggest red flag. And that's the one that you cannot be lenient on. You have to be very, very harsh on that person and say, I need to be moving closer to Jesus. And if I'm not, then this is not going to work.
Yeah, we wanted to drive this one home at the end, because no matter, we could sit here all day and talk about 1,000 different red flags that you should, be wary of, but they're all going to fall under this umbrella of, are they pushing you closer to Christ or are they pulling you away from Christ? Because it's going to be one or the other. I promise you it will. So if you don't know which one it is, that's probably a sign. So we wanted to end with this because this is ultimately the most important red flag you could ever see. And we are assuming that before you even go on your first date, you know that they're a believer, because I think that's a great way to go ahead and weed out, people that you're not meant to be with, because they would not be equally yoked with you. So already setting that precedent, they could still be a believer and not pushing you towards Christ the way that they should be, at least not in this season. So that is going to be number one always. That is the biggest red flag in your relationship, I think.
Yeah, it really is.
And that's what it boils down to. Like I said, we could talk about these red flags all day long, but at the end of the day, they're all going to fall under, are they pulling you away or pushing you towards, Yeah.
You have to pray through this whole process, because we are not wise enough on our own to be able to discern all of these. So we hope that this episode has gotten you thinking a little bit. If you see a friend in a relationship that you're noticing some of these red flags, please reach out to them and just have a conversation. And you need to go at it from a place of love, and you need to go at it from a place of saying, here's what I've noticed. I just want to make you aware. Not, this is what you need to do, because ultimately your friend has to decide what they want to do. And same to you. You have to decide what to do with this information. But we want to make you aware of some things that we noticed in relationships we had or people that we've known. And we want you to be very aware in general while you're dating. to notice things. Notice the really good things that would make someone a really strong spouse and that are pushing you closer to Christ. And notice the things that are in that person that are pulling you away. And make notes,
Yeah.
Keep track of that.
Pro-con list.
That's right. Pro-con list.
I was joking, but I mean, I guess you could.
Yeah.
But more importantly, talk to God about the good and the bad.
Right. He will ultimately steer you in the right direction if you trust him and you trust him with the dating process. You can't do it on your own. And you have to get to the point where you say, God, you're in charge. Help me to see the things that I need to see. And I will trust you with where you're leading me.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this was encouraging to you, especially if you're in this season or will be at one point in your life for another or another life.
Another life.
It sounded like I was saying
in your second life.
In your second life. You know what I mean? But like Nicholas said, maybe like share this with a friend if they're dating, whether they have a good relationship or not. I think these are really good tidbits of knowledge that we're sharing, and you had a lot of good golden nuggets. So I learned a lot. I hope you guys did too. And we will be back here again next week for another episode. Keep living life in the right lane.